Hello, welcome to my entry for this year's Festive Tech Calendar 2023. I am, usually when I do these kinds of talks, I keep it to a technical topic, but this time I'm focusing more on soft skills, in this particular case, soft skills for developers. So just to introduce myself, my name is Barrett Blake. I am a Microsoft MVP for business applications, specifically for Power Automate. I work as an Azure Solutions Architect as a consultant. There's a whole bunch more about me there, and you can see that. And I won't delve into all of that, but I try to participate in the community and get involved. And as such, do a lot of speaking and blogging opportunities. And as I mentioned today, I'm going to be talking about soft skills for developers. So, what is it that makes these soft skills so important? I'm a developer. I write code all day. Why should I care about these soft skills, these communication skills, about dealing with other people? Well, any of us who've been in the field for more than just a short time have realized that an extraordinary amount of our time as developers isn't sitting in front of a computer, right? With our IDE open, whether it's Visual Studio or VS Code or whatever it might be that we use to write our code. We spend a lot of our time in meetings. We spend a lot of our time interacting with other people, maybe coworkers, maybe clients, maybe our business stakeholders, whatever it might be. And being able to navigate these situations is critical. And the short version is, especially in the job market today, where things are a bit tighter for a lot of developers, the truth of it is that soft skills can make or break your career. And while I'm no longer a manager, I spent much of the last 9 years as a manager of development teams. I was responsible for the hiring and training, cross training, and disciplinary action, and one-on-ones, and just interacting with my team members. And as part of that, I conducted a ton of interviews. And last year I went out searching for a new job. So not only as a manager who was hiring, I went through probably close to 60 or 70 interviews of myself, as the person looking for a job. And throughout all of that, I've come to, one really inescapable conclusion, and that as a whole, as a group, developers really suck at the soft skills. We're terrible at it. We're bad communicators. We're bad team members. We're bad with our interpersonal skills, and we're bad with our time management, and just on and on and on. So I'm going to take a look at a number of these soft skills that we should be developing, and talk about why each of them is kind of important to us. So the first thing I want to talk about is time management. This is probably one of the most critical things for us as developers, time management, whether we're working on tasks for projects or bugs or some other task, estimates, whatever it might be. We have estimates and deadlines that we have to deal with. We're expected to be productive. And one of the favorite terms of project managers, velocity. You hear a lot about velocity as developers. How much you get done and how much time it takes you to get things done. So it can be something that's really difficult to accomplish, especially when our workday is, peppered with ridiculous distractions like meetings and status updates and emails and project managers. So it's hard to keep our time organized and productive. And each environment that you work in has its own set of distractions. If you're working in an office, especially with the modern nightmare that's the open office concept, you've got all those noises around you. You've got people walking around, conversations around the water cooler. There could be a dozen different meetings going on, and most of the time you're only hearing one side, or even worse, if somebody's not using headphones, you're hearing both sides of the conversation. And if you're working from home, that's a whole different set of distractions. You could have, kids playing games or watching TV, or your spouse or significant other come in and ask you questions or talk to you, or your neighbors mowing their lawn, or whatever it might be. Every place that you work, regardless of what it is, has its own set of distractions. And those distractions will have a negative effect on your productivity. So the question, becomes, with all those distractions, how do you keep on task? what are the things that you can do to help you keep on task? And one of the first things you can work on is your organizational skills. So this is about how well you can fulfill the assigned tasks. Are you working on them in the right order? Are you correctly implementing all the requirements of those tasks? How are you prioritizing them correctly? How quickly can you pick back up on a task after you have an interruption, like a meeting or a phone call or whatever it might be? There was a study by the University of California, Irvine that found that on average it takes 23 minutes to refocus after an interruption. So by keeping yourself well organized and by working on those organizational skills, you can ramp back up in 10 or 15 minutes instead of 20 or 30 minutes. And that's time saved that can go towards completing the tasks and make you more productive. Second area of time management is effective scheduling. How much control you actually have over your schedule depends a lot on the work environment that you're working in, but there are things that you can do to exert at least a little bit of control. Try to push back on meetings that you feel like you don't need to be a part of. We all know that a lot of people get invited to meetings just in case. Be somebody who pushes back if you don't see a legitimate reason to be a part of that meeting. And if you're the one scheduling the meeting, make sure that you're only inviting those people who really need to be a part of it. Pay attention to the schedules of those that you're inviting. Especially if you're using like your company calendar with Outlook, that you can see all the other meetings that people have on their schedule, and you can try to find. It's not easy, I admit, but you can try to find blocks of time that people have free that are kind of sandwiched in between other meetings, so that you're not plopping a meeting down in the middle of a 3-hour window where they could be working on being productive. So be mindful of the schedules of the people that you're inviting if you're the one organizing. There's nothing more useless than a 30 or even a 60-minute gap between meetings. That's time that's completely and utterly wasted and useless. So like I said, once you have that interruption, it takes you 20 minutes, 25 minutes to get back into productive mind. And if your next meeting is in 5 minutes or half an hour, you're going to get almost nothing done. So, be mindful of your time as much as you can, and mindful of others' times if you have that chance. The other thing that I wanted to kind of talk about with this kind of stuff is focusing techniques. There's a couple of different things. There's like one of the more popular ones right now is called the Pomodoro technique, where you focus for 25 hours and then you take like a 5-minute break. 25 minutes, and then you take like a 5-minute break. There's another one called alternative flow time, where you work until you start to lose focus, and then you take a 10-minute break or a 15-minute break. So there's a lot of different techniques out there that help you focus and stay on task. For Pomodoro especially, there are like music tracks that are out there that are specifically timed for that 25-minute block. So when the music cuts out, it's time to go take a break. Or there's all kinds of timers that you can use to help you keep on task and to know when to take those breaks. So if you take those intermittent short breaks, it helps you to stay focused in the long term, and you're not away from that task long enough that that it's causing a problem. There's another one like 20-20-20, where it says every 20 minutes you take 20 seconds to look at something that's at least 20 feet away from you. Which is one that both helps you to focus, but it also helps reduce the strain on your eyes. If you're sitting there staring at a computer all day, that computer screen is a couple feet away from you. Your eyes start to get tired, and it makes it harder to focus. Whereas if you take that break every 20 minutes, take a few seconds to look at something that's far away, focus on something far away, that helps to rest your eyes, and that helps you to stay focused as well. So the next thing that I want to talk about is communication skills. So developers need to be able to communicate, well and effectively with other people. That might be users, it might be clients, it might be project managers, business stakeholders, other members of your team, managers, there's a ton of different people that we interact with, and we have to be able to communicate with those people. And most of those people that we deal with are not going to be technical in nature. But as developers, we have a tendency to speak in technical terms. And that's great, if you're talking to another developer. But again, you got to remember that a lot of the people that you're talking to are not technical in nature. If you start going off into these technical topics and talking about the effectiveness of one messaging platform over another one, and one server over another one, or why you should do things in JavaScript as opposed to CSS or whatever it might be. They don't care about that stuff. They don't understand what you're talking about. And as we've gone into a more remote world, not just working from home like some of us are able to do, but in working with people from across the globe, it's become a global economy. You work with teams that are all over the planet, and you need to be able to communicate well with those people, especially given that you're not all sharing the same first language. So that those communication skills have become more important than ever. And as much as we would love to spend all day writing code as developers, a lot of what we do all day is communicating with people. The meetings, training, requirements gathering, writing emails, documentation, documenting architectures, and whatever it might be. There's a lot of communication that goes on. And as I mentioned, before, we're not great at it. And there's different forms that it might take. There's speaking and writing forms. That's how a lot of our communication is done. We sit in meetings. We're talking to other people. We might be doing demos. We had an example from my own career where I was sitting in a demo. Some other developer was presenting, and they were doing a demo of the things that we had accomplished in the recent weeks. And they started going off onto this deep dive into the HTML and the CSS and the JavaScript, and the person that the team that we were demonstrating to, they were not technical people. They're the business side. They don't understand any of that stuff, and it probably went on for 5 or 10 minutes of this explanation before this guy who was a director spoke up. He's like, "Okay, what's CSS?" So we have to remember as developers who we're talking to, who we're communicating with. So we need to be clear. We need to be concise. We need to relate things in a manner that is understandable to the person that we're talking to, not in a manner that's clear to us. And conversely, we have to be able to listen. We have to be able to understand what people are telling us. A lot of what we do as developers is coming to an understanding of what it is that we're supposed to be doing. Are we working on the correct topic? Do we have the right requirements? We'll often be involved in gathering those requirements at some level. And that requires developing effective listening skills. We can't develop the right features if we don't have an understanding of what those features are, what those requirements are. I can't tell you how many times over the years that I've seen developers have to do and redo and redo and redo the thing that they've been working on because they didn't take the time up front to actually gather the requirements, to understand what those requirements should be. And so, they get to a certain point and they start sharing that with the client. The client's like, "Well, what is this? This has nothing to do with what I wanted." And especially if you're working in a waterfall environment, it could be months between when you did that initial requirements gathering and when you're doing this demonstration for the client. And you can find that, if those requirements that were gathered at the beginning weren't the right requirements, you've wasted months of effort and a lot of money. And that causes, that's probably the number one reason projects failed is poor communication, not gathering those requirements correctly. So that effective listening means that we don't interrupt, we don't jump to conclusions, we don't assume that we understand what it is that the user is saying. Part of that effective listening includes, asking questions and clarifying, restating what it is that we think that we understand, so that we can ensure that we do understand. We say things like, what I hear you saying is this, or by this do you mean X or Y or Z, and restating that so that we make sure that what we heard is actually what they said. And by probing and getting that good understanding, a lot of times that will also elicit additional details, things that they had forgotten about when they were explaining things that they hadn't really thought would be important from a technical aspect. Things get forgotten. People relate from their own personal experience, and we all make the assumption that who it is that we're talking to, we don't often mean to do it, but we assume that the people that we're talking to are coming from the same frame of reference. And most of the time that's not true. And so we leave out things that are obvious to us, but they're not obvious to the person that we're talking to. And by, asking those clarifying questions, by restating, by repeating what it is that they say, sometimes you can elicit those additional details that are important. A really effective and helpful part of that process is to summarize something and, follow up, maybe with an email. So, you go through this requirements gathering session, you write it up and say, okay, here's the things that I think we talked about, and send it to them, say, okay, do I have all this right? And they may point out things that you got wrong, things that you wrote down wrong, things that you heard incorrectly, or, again, it might elicit further details that got left out. And if you take that time to do all that up front and put that effort in up front before you write a single line of code, you can save yourself a lot of time later and a lot of headaches. And then one other thing that I kind of want to bring up is about that interpersonal interaction, eye contact. Eye contact is an important part of both speaking and communicating with somebody, but also listening to them. If you never look at them, they will come to the conclusion that you're not listening, that you're not communicating with them. That if you're the one speaking, they'll think you're talking to somebody else or talking to nobody in particular. They'll think that you are disinterested, and as a result, they'll lose interest as well. And, that doesn't mean stare at them the entire time, but make sure that you're making eye contact with them on a regular basis as part of that communication. If instead they think you're not interested, then that communication breaks down. So, for instance, if I were giving this presentation in a room, as I've done a couple of times with this particular talk, if I'm spending the entire time staring up at the ceiling or looking at the far wall, or if I've turned around staring at my slide deck and have my back to you the whole time, you're going to lose interest because you're going to think I don't have any interest. But, if I'm engaging with you visually, if I'm, maintaining that eye contact, then it kind of helps connect us in a way that the words alone don't do. So all these points on communication, things that I've been talking about, are kind of tied together with that need for good interpersonal skills. It requires that we have the right attitude in our interactions. If things become hostile or confrontational, then that communication breaks down. That doesn't mean you can't disagree with somebody, but you have to do it in a manner which is respectful. And that's something that seems to be fairly lost nowadays. And the words that you're saying matter as well. That's part of the communication. Instead of saying this is how it has to be done, or this is the way it should be done, instead saying, okay, I hear what you're saying, but what if we tried this, or what would you think if we did that? And being able to interact in that manner, in a way which you can present differing opinions but not be confrontational. And so that kind of leads us to the next topic, which is people skills. So, when you're working with other people, those interpersonal skills are very key. Some of the people that you work with, you're going to get along with them great. Others not so much. There are always going to be people that you have a hard time getting along with. I mentioned earlier that I spent a lot of the last 9 years as a manager over teams and doing a lot of interviews. And over those years, as part of those interviews, one of my favorite questions that I would ask people was, how do you deal with people that you can't get along with at work? What's your approach to working effectively with those people that you conflict with? And the answer that I almost universally got from everybody that I talked to was, I get along with everyone. People think, they think that's the answer that you want to hear as a manager. They think that's a safe answer. Well, they're wrong. Absolutely no one gets along with everybody. And you know it, I know it. And if you're telling me that you get along with everyone, I know that you're a liar. Right? It's as simple as that. There's not a person on this planet that gets along with everybody. We all have people that will rub us the wrong way. And, it's not necessarily an openly hostile relationship. But most of the time, that kind of thing gets suppressed, and you have to find ways to deal with it. And there are going to be people that you work with that you just don't get along with. It's a fact of life. And if we have to spend a lot of our time dealing with those people, that affects our happiness, and that affects our relationship with the team as a whole. And over time, that happiness level drops, and our work productivity drops as well as a result of that. So one of the things of developing those good people skills is empathy. That's a difficult thing. It's people want to feel like you're connecting with them. They want to feel like you understand what you're saying. That's a difficult one for me, especially. They want to feel like you care about them and what they're going through, but that doesn't mean that you are going to solve their problems or that you're going to fix what's wrong. That's not what they want. They don't want you to solve their problem for you. They want you to understand them as people and as coworkers and the challenges that they face. You're not, in most cases, you're not a one-person enterprise. You work with people. You have challenges. They have challenges. We all face things that are difficult, and their challenges may overlap with yours, but most of the time they don't. They have a different background. They have a different personality. They have a different life. You can't understand most of what they're going through. It's not something you're going to be able to do. But if you're trying to understand as much as you can, and you're there to support them in whatever way that they need you to be there for them, that's what matters. It's about making sure that they know that whatever it is, you've got their back. That's what empathy is all about. It's also about being willing to listen to them, to listen to their ideas without judgment. If you don't agree with their ideas, and sometimes you will, sometimes you won't, but you need to be willing to listen to them and willing to explore what it is about their idea that you don't agree with. What is there that doesn't match up with your understanding or with your viewpoint. Can you see where they're coming from? What are the valid points of their view? Because most of the time they will have some valid points. And part of empathy is your willingness to see what those points might be and to see if there are ways that you can bring your two viewpoints together. And those are the kinds of questions that you need to be willing to ask yourself. Another part of it is emotional control. This one's also difficult for a lot of us. You have to learn to preserve your calm and remain in control and to persevere through those difficult situations and challenges. It doesn't mean you won't get frustrated. It doesn't mean you won't have difficult times. But it also doesn't mean that you can't challenge someone or have an opposing point of view. But if you lose your cool, if you lose your patience, then you lose the discussion. And so maintain that emotional control is key as well. And the last thing I want to kind of talk about with these people skills is leadership. Leadership is not the same thing as management. A manager is not necessarily a leader, and a leader is not necessarily a manager. Many of the best and the strongest leaders around you will be your coworkers, not your managers. You should find ways to develop your own leadership skills. Certainly managers should have leadership skills. We hope that they do. And, there are good managers and there are bad managers, like there is for everything. But great leadership can and should come from you and your fellow team members, not just your managers. Leadership includes setting good examples. It includes mentoring. It includes sharing with those around you and being a contributor to the resolution of conflicts and not being a cause of the conflict. So that leads me to the next thing I want to talk about, which is teamwork. We're all part of a team. We have people that we work with. We have people that even if we're a developer team of one, and I've been there, we still have clients. We still have business stakeholders. We still have users. We still have other people that we need to collaborate with in one way or another, and that's teamwork. And if you aren't on a developer team of one, even better, you've got people to share that load with. But it's critical that we're able to work well with those coworkers. It's far too easy for us as developers to get in that groove and completely ignore what's going on around us, to put our head down, just type that code. We need to make sure that our team members feel like they can come to us with questions. They need to feel like we have respect for them and for their work and their ideas. And there are a few ways that we can do that. Show respect for their time. Show up on time to meetings. If you have one meeting that's running on into another meeting, you need to end that meeting. You need to end your meetings on time, and you need to get to meetings on time. And when you don't, it's going to happen to all of us occasionally, but there are going to be those coworkers who are consistently late to every meeting, and that is beyond frustrating. Don't be one of those people. Show up on time, and if you're running out of time, then table the rest of the discussion, schedule a time to follow up. Be respectful of other people's time. And if you're not going to be able to make it to a meeting or to an appointment, communicate that beforehand as far in advance as possible. As soon as you're not going to be able to make it. Don't be 10 minutes into the meeting and into the scheduled meeting time and then send a message say, "Oh, I'm not going to make it." That doesn't fly. So be respectful of other people's time. Respect other people's ideas. I mentioned you need to be open-minded and willing to listen to their point of view. And you need to be willing to give honest and respectful feedback. It's perfectly all right to have your own opinions, to share those opinions, and to have differing opinions from the people you're talking to. But you need to have an equal view with other people. You need to be considerate of their views and be willing to go back and forth and find the common ground. You need to be approachable. Make sure your fellow team members feel like they can come to you with questions, with ideas, with problems, whatever it might be. Be willing to give them some of your time. You've got deadlines. Yeah, you've got things you got to get done. But you also need to be willing to spare some of that time for them. And in return, they'll be willing to do that for you. Find ways to build the team. There's a tendency, it seems, in our culture to have work activities or team activities, revolve around going out to a bar for drinks after work. That's not ideal, and it's not inclusive. You need to be inclusive of everybody's feelings. There are a lot of people who don't drink. And when group activities solely revolve around going out to the bar and getting drunk after work, that's not being inclusive. That's not being respectful of everybody's viewpoint and culture. That's not to say that you can't have activities like that. But historically, for instance, from my own perspective, virtually everywhere I've worked, that has been the only group activity that has ever been done is going out to the bar after work. One of the places I worked at, they had this term called mandatory Mondays, where everybody was expected to go to the bar across the street after work on Monday. I did that like once or twice, and no, I'm not doing that anymore. But if that's your only team building exercise, that's not building a team. Find other ways. And it doesn't have to be after work activities. A lot of people don't want to socialize after work. Be respectful of that. You can have some of those activities, but also have things that you can do during the workday. There are things that you can do as a group to build teamwork or to build the team that take very little time that you could do as part of a meeting that you're already having. For instance, on the team that I'm on right now, on Fridays during stand-up, we have a Friday Fun Day question, where we have a question that everybody answers as part of their status report. That could be any kind of question. It's just something to help get to know your coworkers and to find a common place. You can do little things like that to help build a team. And there are all kinds of ideas of things that you could do. So the next thing I want to talk about is interviewing. Most of us are going to go through a lot of interviews over the years. I have conducted hundreds and hundreds of interviews as a manager. And I have, as a job seeker, probably also gone through hundreds and hundreds of interviews over the years. Let me tell you something. In today's job market, people with the technical skills are a dime a dozen, as the saying goes. They are common. Most of the people that you interview as a manager can do the job from a technical standpoint. That's not the point of the interview, and unfortunately a lot of companies miss that point. The point of the interview is finding somebody who's going to be a good part of the team. And for me as a hiring manager, it was the soft skills that were the differentiator between those who got the job and those who didn't. Those interviewing skills are critical. You need to be able to communicate well during that interview. You need to be able to market yourself, that self-promotion. Self-promotion is not bragging. It's not saying, oh, I'm great, I am fantastic. It's being able to promote, here are the reasons why I would be a great member of this team. Here are the things that make me the person that you want to choose. But if you get off into bragging and pumping yourself up and talking about how superior you are to everybody else, that's not going to get you the job. At least not with a manager that you actually want to work for. But you also need to be able to hear what it is that the interviewer is asking you. They're going to ask you questions. Are you actually answering the questions that they're asking? I can't even count the number of times when I'm interviewing somebody and I ask a question and their answer has absolutely nothing to do with the question that I asked. Or it might be an answer to a question that I asked 3 questions ago. It's just person after person was like that when I was conducting interviews. And, those are the people that I almost immediately write off. Sometimes I'll get, I'll take it through to the end of the interview, give people every chance. But, if I'm getting through 4 or 5 or 6 questions in a row that they're not answering, I'm going to cut it off. I'm going to say, thank you, but you're not a right fit for us. So, you need to make sure that you're listening to the question and that the answer that you're giving is actually answering the question they're asking. And in the later steps, when you get to that point, you need to be able to negotiate. You need to know what your worth is. You need to know what the market is supporting right now for somebody with your skills and your experience. Are you regularly checking those market values? Check in with recruiters. Talk to recruiters frequently. Even if you're not looking for a job, talk to recruiters. Maintain those relationships with recruiters because they will tell you, what the market will support for you right now. And they'll tell you if you're not getting your worth. Regularly check that market value. They'll also let you know if you need to rework your skill set. I have a podcast that I listen to as often as I can by Taylor Desson, who is called Guidance Counselor 2.0. He does live stream. It's like 10:30 a.m. Eastern time, usually most weekdays. But if you go out and LinkedIn and search for him, and I've connected with him, or I've linked and posted some of the stuff. I've actually been a guest on his podcast before as well. But you can find links on my blog or let me know and I'll point you in the right place. But one of the things that he was talking about a couple days ago was, the skill set that people are looking for in the market. There is an overabundance of front-end developers right now. And what people are really looking for are the back-end developers right now. So, whether it's Java or C# or, Python or whatever it might be, those back-end languages are key right now. They're the things that people are looking for. So know what the market is looking for and, evaluate, be honest in your evaluation of your own skill set. Am I keeping up with the market needs, or do I need to rework my skill set? Do I need to kind of transition myself into another skill set? So always kind of keep apprised of what's going on in the market and make sure you're aware of what's out there. And that leads me to my next thing is learning. Technology, as I mentioned, moves fast. It seems like every day there's some new language or some new framework or library or something else that rockets into popularity. For those of us who focus on the cloud, things like Azure, AWS, nearly every single day brings some new feature or product into those cloud environments. It's like there's a constant stream of newness, and we have to expend extraordinary amounts of time learning about these new things in order to keep up. And it's to the point now you will never, ever know everything about any particular cloud environment. It's just not possible for anyone. So, you have to know enough to know that things exist, what's out there. But don't ever try to deep dive into everything that's out there. You just can't do it. So the ability to learn what's going to be important for you is a critical skill set for developers to have. Because you can't keep up with everything, but you have to decide what it is that you are going to keep up with, and you do have to keep up with things. Even if you're focused on a single language, for me, C#, SQL, JavaScript are kind of my primary focuses. Even in those, there's new stuff all the time, new things to learn. And that, learning can take many forms. It could be formal education, it could be informal. You could, you're participating in one of them right now. You're listening to me talk about something. Or you might be going to conferences or, looking at other videos or reading blog posts. There's just an endless array of resources now to help us on our learning journey. Some of it's, provided by companies, some of it's not. Unfortunately, a lot of companies aren't real great at supporting their developers with, learning new skills. And some of them, they may have, a lot of resources out there, but they aren't willing to let you invest in those resources on company time. And really that's sad, because that should be a key part of your total compensation package, if you want to put it that way. Instead, especially as consultants, all they care about is your 40 hours billable, and anything else is on you to do in your own time. And that's not the way to run a company, but you got to take what you can get. So I try to take opportunities to learn what I can, but also as developers, we should be helping each other learn as well. For instance, one of the things a lot of teams do is code reviews. Take that opportunity to both learn and to share knowledge with others. If you look at what somebody has done as you're reviewing their code and say, okay, what can I learn from this? But also to come at it from the other angle as part of that and say, okay, they did it this way. Have you thought about doing it this different way that I know about? So, take those opportunities to share knowledge as well as learn from others. Because, as developers, we will never know anything. Even if you focus on one single language your entire career, you will never know everything that there is to know about how to do stuff in that language. Especially junior developers, they've a lot of times will have learned things that are new that you haven't learned about yet. So take those opportunities to learn. I've spent, as I mentioned before, I spent some time as a teacher, teaching those who are learning coding. And while I'm not doing it right now, I would love to do it again. But as part of the learning modules that the students were going through, at the halfway point and near the end, the students would spend a week working on a project. And we'd spend our class time that week reviewing each other's code, reviewing each other's solutions. And one of the things that I kept trying to hammer into them was that there isn't a right way or a wrong way to solve any particular problem. One of the great things about coding is there are a lot of different ways to solve any particular problem that you're trying to solve. And so code reviews are a perfect opportunity to learn from each other what some of those different ways might be. And there are other ways to keep apprised of what's new out there. Conference events, social media, whatever it is. There are tons of ways to learn what's out there and what can be of use. Next thing I want to talk about is goal setting. So far too many of us as developers have no clear vision of where we want to go from here, other than somewhere. We haven't taken the time to sit down and evaluate where we are or where we want to go from here. Maybe it's just because we haven't taken that time, or maybe we're afraid to commit to something long term. The technology changes so fast. We can sometimes be afraid to chart a course that will take us, a long way down a particular road, and then we might see that road vanish beneath our feet. Some languages, some technologies stick around forever. SQL, even COBOL there's still a lot of COBOL positions out there, and that's a language that everybody said would be dead 30 years ago. It's not. It's still around. But if we don't chart any course, then where does our path take us? And the answer obviously is nowhere. You stay right where you're at, and if you're fine with that, so be it. When I worked at a bank, one of my coworkers on the database team had been there for probably 15 years as a SQL developer, and they had no desire to do anything else. They were content with where they were at, and for them that's just fine. But for a lot of us, I don't want to be in the same position 20 years from now as I was 20 years ago. So if you're not content with where you're at now, ask yourself the question: where do you want to be in a year, or 3 years, or 5 years, or 10 years? Learn to set those goals. Make them both short-term goals and long-term goals. A lot of people kind of view it as that a good approach is to set a long-term goal, maybe 5 years or 10 years down the road, and then work backwards from there. If I have a 5-year goal, figure out what goals I need to do each 12 months to accomplish that 5-year goal. And for each of those 12-month goals, what do I need to accomplish each month in order to accomplish the 12-month goal? And so on back, to a point where you're comfortable at. Maybe it's a weekly goal. Some people even take it all the way down to a daily goal. Here's what I want to do every single day. They'll set the goal for the day. I can't work that minutely, but if it works for you, go with it. And review those goals regularly. It doesn't do any good to set a goal, write it down, then ignore it. Schedule some time, at least weekly, to review your goals, to evaluate your progress, and to reassess where you're at. Don't be afraid to change goals in flight. Don't be afraid to make adjustments. Because things change, things move. Be willing to move with them. How you face problems is a critical part of your coding repertoire. One of the key factors of problem solving is patience. It takes time to figure out what those problems are. And anyone who has debugged an error message knows it can be resolved quickly, or it can sometimes take days. I once spent 2 or 3 days trying to resolve an issue that was caused by a closing curly brace that was in the wrong location. Sometimes problem solving takes patience. It also requires that you be objective. Your bias can often lead you to incorrect assumptions and conclusions. And sometimes the really difficult problems can require creative solutions. Work on ways of developing that creativity. It doesn't even need to be something work-related. Find a hobby or an outlet to develop your creative skills. Maybe you try writing or painting, or building Lego, or music, or collecting something. There's no end of things that can help you develop your creativity. Oftentimes I find that the best ideas come to us when we're doing something that's completely unrelated. So find some kind of creative outlet that's not programming. Find something to do. A lot of people might say, well, I can't draw, or I can't play piano, or I can't do this, or I can't do that. Well, yeah, there's a portion of a talent that might come from natural skill. But for the vast majority of us, and for the vast majority of talents, those talents and skills come from practice. They don't come from natural talent. You can't sit around all day and just wait for it to come to you. It never will. And yeah, there are a few people out there who are savants, who are just naturally gifted at doing something like playing piano or whatever it might be. But for most of us, we have to practice. We have to put in that effort. It's just like coding. You have to spend a lot of time coding to know how to code. And with any hobby, it's the same thing. So practice. By doing so, that helps you develop your problem-solving skills by developing your creativity. And another thing to remember about problem solving is you're not alone. When I was a manager who was mentoring junior developers on my team, I had a policy for them. If you have a problem, I wanted you to spend, at least 30, 45, 60 minutes trying to figure it out yourself, but never spend more than 2 hours. When you hit that mark and you still haven't figured out how to solve the problem, go ask somebody for help. It's a great opportunity for you as a junior developer to learn, and it's a great opportunity for senior developers and leaders to learn how to teach, and both people win as a result. The last area that I'm going to talk about is yourself, your view of yourself specifically, your self-evaluation. Part of what you need to be able to do is to honestly be able to evaluate yourself, both the positive and the negative. You have skills and talents, but you're not perfect. Be honest with yourself. You have deficiencies and weaknesses. Learn to recognize what those weaknesses are and make it part of your goal setting process to work on ways that you can overcome or at least minimize some of those weaknesses. You can't overcome those weaknesses if you aren't willing to recognize that you have them in the first place. So you have to be humble. You have to be willing to recognize that there are things that you don't do well. And it's perfectly okay to say, I have no idea how to do this. I have no idea what I'm doing. There's a topic that came up frequently with the students that I was working with. And it comes up a lot with other people that I've mentored over the years, especially those that are early in their career, is this idea of imposter syndrome. It's that feeling that you don't belong, that you feel insufficient, that you don't feel like you know what you're doing. I've been a developer for nearly 20 years professionally now, and was doing it personally long before that. Most of my career has been spent in C#, JavaScript, SQL Server, but there's still basic things that I have to go out and Google every day. Things that I've done dozens of times before. Most of us have to do that. We can't remember how to do everything off the top of our head, especially if it's something that you don't do every day. It slips out of your mind, and there's nothing wrong with that. In the same day as a developer, you're going to go back and forth between I'm a genius and I'm an idiot several times. It's perfectly all right. That's part of the nature of what we do. Understand that and accept that and just keep working on getting better. But also, on the opposite end of that, you have to be willing to recognize those talents and skills that you do have and be willing to find ways to accentuate and improve those talents. A talent that isn't exercised deteriorates. And I'm not just talking about those talents that are specifically work-related. It might be music or writing or art or carpentry or whatever it is that you like to do. If you don't keep doing it, those skills go away over time. So practice those talents, and that also helps to improve your self-discipline and your creativity, which will have positive effects on your work outcome. And be confident in the things that you do well. Be willing to recognize, hey, I'm pretty good at this. I do this well, even if I don't do it well all the time. And the more that you exercise those skills, the stronger that they will become. So, you can be confident without being arrogant. Don't let it go to your head. A big part of that self-view that doesn't get talked about a lot, except when things go wrong, is accountability. But even when things are going well, accountability is still critical. Mistakes will happen. And most of the time they're going to be minor mistakes, but occasionally they can be quite big. One of my own biggest mistakes nearly cost the bank that I worked with at the time a couple million in fines and fees and lost revenue from clients. There was one night that I pushed a bug fix to production to resolve an issue. And this was a system that moved money around at night. It would take all the transactions from the day and it would line them up with the bank accounts that the accounts were tied to, and create these wire transfers that would move money back and forth. One day I pushed a bug fix to production, and like I said, and it broke everything, and things were going wrong, and so that that particular night, none of the wire transfers happened, and no one had noticed it until the next morning because the change didn't generate an error message. So, when it was discovered the next morning and we were running around trying to fix it, I owned up to it. I said, hey, it was my my mistake. I pushed the bug fix into production that I thought was going to fix something, and it broke something else. And I had a great boss at the time. She backed me up. She was able to work with us and help. We were able to get things resolved before the deadline hit, and the fines started piling on. So being accountable, part of it is taking responsibility when things go wrong, but it's also means taking responsibility when things go well. So it's a part of most companies to have some sort of review process, whether it's annual, semi-annual, whatever it is, where basically your job is to promote yourself in an effort to justify any raises or bonuses. Personally, I think it's an idiotic process, but it's the environment that many of us have to deal with. And I talked earlier about the whole self-promotion thing, but the short version is being able to take responsibility for things that went well is going to be just as important to your career as taking responsibility for the things that go wrong. So I mentioned at the beginning that I was a manager for most of the last 9 years, and I spent a lot of time interviewing people. As I mentioned, I came to that inescapable conclusion that people are just, developers in general are just really bad at these interpersonal skills, at these soft skills. And I came to the realization that, me as a manager, I was just as bad. So I began driving myself to overcome these deficiencies in myself and tried to promote them within my teams as well. And it's become more and more apparent to me, especially, as the job market has gotten a lot tighter over the last few months to a year, that these interpersonal skills, these soft skills, are what is going to set us apart from the people that we're competing with for jobs. But it's not just, when you're looking for a job, even when you're working in a position and you're not actively looking for someplace else to be, it's those interpersonal skills that will set you apart in your team. It's those things that will stand out, make people take notice of you. So, for me personally, it started with taking up speaking opportunities, like speaking at conferences. Public speaking terrifies me. I hate it, but I force myself to do it. And over the last few years, as I've done it, I've seen tremendous personal growth come from it for me personally. I'm also taking the time to mentor junior developers and those that want to become developers, people who are trying to transition careers. I'm blogging, I'm doing podcasts, I'm creating training videos, and so on and so forth. And, as part of last year, I was able to teach, as I mentioned, part-time as part of a boot camp. And the net result of all that together is that I am a better person, I'm a better team member, I'm a better speaker, I'm a better blogger. And it has been the development of those soft skills that has been the driving factor. That's one thing that I'm certain about. I'm far from perfect still. I'm far from even being good at it. If you've bothered to listen to me for the last almost hour, go on about this stuff, you'll notice that I still suck at a lot of this stuff, but I'm getting better, and I'm working at it, and I'm focusing on where I need to improve instead of where others need to improve. Because by improving myself, that makes my whole team better, I think. And these days, although I'm an architect and I'm not, actively leading a team, I'm still a part of one. And I can still do all that I can to demonstrate the kinds of leadership that I mentioned that will help raise the level of the whole team, not just myself. And if we, put in the effort to raise our own soft skills, then our teams and all the people around us rise up as well. We can all benefit as a result. So it comes back to full circle as to the why. When there was a time when a developer could just hide in their cubicle, they could ignore the world around them, they could write code for most of the day. But that's not the world that we live in now. That's not the way technology is now. Our technology has made, while it's made our lives better, it's also made our world much smaller, much more interconnected. And we're constantly having to deal with other people. We're constantly having to interact with them. And as I mentioned, the industry is far more competitive than it was 5 or 10 or 20 years ago. You can't sit and hide in your cubicle anymore. You have to interact with people. And those interactions have a real effect on your career, whether it be for good or for ill. And, from this, going forward, as it's been over the last few years, those people who develop their soft skills are going to be the ones that excel. And while the rest of us who don't, those are the people who are going to be left behind. And those are the people who aren't going to progress in their careers. So thank you all for your time and for listening to me blather on for a while about soft skills. If you want to reach out and connect with me, the best way is on LinkedIn. That's where I spend more time than any place else right now. So if you have any questions or just want to connect, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. There's also a link there on the page to my blog where you can see some of the other posts that I've done and connections to some of the podcasts and things. You can find out what I'm actively at. Again, thank you for all your time, and I hope you have a good day.